For years, detectives believed the death of Leslie Neulander was a tragic accident, one of those heartbreaking cases that seem simple on the surface. A loving wife, or respected doctor husband. A quiet home in upstate New York, on that cold January morning in 2007. Leslie was found lifeless in her bathroom. The scene appeared ordinary, no signs of forced entry, no obvious weapon, no struggle, just a fall, a fatal accident, or so it seemed. Her husband, Dr. Robert Neulander, a well-known pediatric neurologist, stood there distraught, insisting it was a tragic mishap. Emergency responders and investigators accepted the story at face value, documenting it as an accidental death. But what they didn't see, what no one questioned, was a subtle, almost invisible clue, one tiny piece of evidence hiding in plain sight, overlooked not because it wasn't there but because it didn't fit the story it wanted to believe. It was a detail so quiet, so easily dismissed, that it would take 6 long years, a second autopsy, and the scrutiny of fresh eyes to reveal a truth far darker than anyone had imagined. This was not just an accident, it was a meticulously concealed murder, a chilling reminder that appearances can deceive, and that sometimes the smallest, quietest clue is the one that changes everything. The case of Leslie Neulander forces us to ask uncomfortable questions. How many times have we trusted what seemed obvious? And how many times have the real answers been hiding right in front of us? It was a frigid morning in January 2007 when Leslie Neulander's life came to a sudden, shocking end. The Neulander home, situated in an affluent upstate New York neighborhood, seemed like the kind of place where tragedies were impossible, a sanctuary of comfort and normalcy. Leslie, a woman in her early 60s, had lived a life filled with modest success, community engagement, and the love of her family. On that particular morning, what appeared to be a simple accident shook the very foundation of her family. She was found in her bathroom, lifeless, her body sprawled on the cold tile floor. At first glance, nothing seemed unusual. There were no signs of forced entry, no evidence of a struggle, no apparent reason for suspicion. Her husband, Dr. Robert Neulander, a respected pediatric neurologist, stood nearby, visibly distressed, recounting a story of a tragic slip-up, momentary loss of balance that ended in fatality. Police officers and emergency responders, encountering the scene, noted the absence of typical indicators of foul play. It seemed to fit the narrative perfectly, a straightforward, if heartbreaking, accident. Yet, beneath the surface, subtle irregularities existed, details too easily dismissed, clues that would later prove pivotal in unraveling the truth. The initial investigation moved with the assumptions of routine. The authorities relied heavily on the apparent evidence: water on the bathroom floor, a head injury consistent with a fall, and the demeanor of the grieving husband. In many ways, the scene was textbook, a domestic accident, an unfortunate event. Doctors who examined Leslie's body confirmed injuries that seemed consistent with her husband's account. The case was closed in a matter of days, filed away as another tragic accident that no one could have prevented. But life has a way of hiding the truth in plain sight. Even in cases that appear straightforward, the smallest inconsistencies can hold enormous weight. In Leslie's case, one detail so subtle, so easily overlooked, hid the reality that her death was not accidental at all. Detectives, accustomed to seeing clear signs of struggle or forced entry, failed to notice the contradictions inherent in the injuries, contradictions that would later become the key to exposing the chilling truth. Over the next several years, the Neulander case sat quietly in records, largely forgotten by law enforcement and the public. Dr. Robert Neulander continued his life, continuing his work, engaging with colleagues, and presenting the image of a husband devastated by tragedy. Those closest to the family mourned in private, accepting the official explanation. Meanwhile, the truth remained buried in plain sight, waiting for someone to ask the right questions. For investigators who initially examined the scene, the subtle signs that could have prompted further inquiry were invisible because they did not fit the narrative they were trained to see. It is a common human error, trusting the obvious, allowing appearances to dictate conclusions. Leslie's case demonstrates how easily a story can become accepted reality when no one looks closely enough to question it. The first cracks in the official story began to appear during a routine review years later. As cold cases are sometimes re-examined, a new set of investigators looked back at the evidence with fresh eyes, questioning the assumptions that had guided the original inquiry. They noticed what others had missed: The nature and placement of Leslie's injuries did not align with a simple fall. Bruises, abrasions, and marks on her body suggested a level of force inconsistent with a bathroom accident. Small yet significant indicators, such as the angle of impact and the absence of defensive wounds in areas typical of accidental falls, created inconsistencies too significant to ignore. The second autopsy revealed details that transformed what had once seemed like a tragic mishap into a premeditated murder. Every investigator who returned to the scene could now see what had been invisible before. The truth had always been there. It had simply been ignored, masked by assumptions and appearances. As the investigation deepened, it became apparent that the story Dr. Neulander had offered investigators did not hold up under scrutiny. Witnesses were re-interviewed, timelines reconstructed, and forensic evidence reanalyzed. One of the most startling revelations was how meticulously he had staged the scene to appear accidental. Water had been manipulated, injuries carefully presented to mimic a fall, and his behavior had been intentionally designed to portray shock and grief. The deception was thorough, a chilling reminder that appearances can be manipulated, and that trust in the obvious can be fatal. By the time these inconsistencies were documented, the detectives realized that for years, they had been led astray, blinded by the convincing facade of a loving husband mourning a wife lost too soon. The uncovering of the truth in Leslie Neulander's case serves as a sobering lesson in the importance of questioning assumptions. Even seasoned investigators, trained to detect deceit and read evidence carefully, can be misled when they allow appearances to dictate their conclusions. In hindsight, the crucial clue had been in front of them all along. The injuries, subtle yet incompatible with an accidental fall, combined with behavioral inconsistencies, painted a starkly different picture. It was a picture of premeditation, of a crime carefully executed to evade detection. By failing to notice these details, authorities had inadvertently allowed a murderer to walk free, a haunting example of how oversight in investigation can have devastating consequences. As new forensic techniques and investigative approaches were applied, the case evolved from a cold file into a high-profile murder investigation. The story of Leslie Neulander became a cautionary tale within law enforcement circles, illustrating how critical it is to question initial impressions and dig deeper when evidence appears to neatly align with convenient explanations. Experts in forensic pathology and criminal investigation dissected the case, emphasizing the importance of subtle indicators often dismissed as insignificant. Every bruise, every mark, every inconsistent statement became a thread, weaving together the reality that the death had been anything but accidental. What had been overlooked for years was now impossible to ignore, forming the foundation for justice that had long been delayed. The culmination of this long and painstaking investigation was both shocking and inevitable. Once the truth was fully uncovered, charges were brought, and the narrative that had stood unchallenged for 6 years was shattered. The details of the murder, revealed through careful analysis of the crime scene and forensic evidence, painted a picture that was almost cinematic in its precision and brutality. Every lie told, every manipulation staged, had been designed to conceal a single truth. Leslie Neulander had been murdered in cold blood, and for years, detectives had failed to see what was hiding right before their eyes. The legacy of the Leslie Neulander case extends far beyond the confines of her tragic death. It serves as a powerful reminder that appearances can deceive, that the obvious is not always true, and that in every investigation, no detail is too small to merit attention. For law enforcement, it became a lesson in humility and diligence, a reminder that the smallest clue can ultimately unravel the most carefully constructed deception. For the public, it is a stark illustration of how easily the truth can be obscure when assumptions replace inquiry, and how justice, though delayed, can eventually prevail when investigators remain vigilant and unyielding in their pursuit of the facts. In the end, the story of Leslie Neulander is not just a tale of murder. It is a cautionary narrative about human error, about the danger of assumptions, and about the resilience of truth. For years, one small clue was dismissed, ignored, and overlooked, and in that oversight, tragedy persisted. But through persistence, diligence, and careful re-evaluation, justice was finally served. The case reminds us all that the truth often hides in plain sight, waiting for someone brave enough to question what everyone else has taken for granted. It challenges us to look more closely, to think more critically, and to understand that in both life and investigation, the smallest detail can make the biggest difference. The chilling reality is that Leslie Neulander's death might have remained a tragic accident forever, if not for the perseverance of those who refuse to accept the obvious. Today, the Neulander case continues to resonate in true crime circles, law enforcement training, and public awareness. It emphasizes the importance of questioning assumptions, challenging narratives, and never underestimating the power of careful observation. It is a story of murder, deception, and ultimate revelation, a story that forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about human behavior, investigative oversight, and the lengths to which some will go to hide their crimes. And perhaps the most haunting lesson of all is that the truth, no matter how deeply concealed, has a way of surfacing. For Leslie Neulander, justice came not from luck, but from diligence, critical thinking, and the refusal to accept things at face value. For viewers and investigators alike, her story stands as a warning. Never ignore the subtle signs, never accept appearances without question, and never assume that what seems obvious is the truth. Because sometimes, the smallest clue is the one that can change everything, and in Leslie Neulander's case, it finally did.